Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Krysta Gibson, the host of Keeping It Real, and I have a wonderful guest for you today. Her name is Debbie Ritter, and hello, Debbie.
Hi.
I want to say hi to you. So Debbie's going to talk to us. She's a spiritual intuitive who reads and teaches the Akashic Records, and you're actually certified by Linda Howe, who is who's written a book on it, or several, I think, and she's kind of like one of the known Akashic Record teacher people. But you've really spent years in yoga, Buddhism, Course in Miracles. You practiced law in New Jersey, so you've got a legal background, and you've worked overseas in China for 10 years. So I think that's fabulous and interesting. So, and you're a new columnist for us. You have a monthly column in New Spirit Journal, which started in 2 months ago. So this is your second column, I think, in that we've just printed. So tell us more about, well, what are the Akashic Records, and how can a person use this for their spiritual growth and process?
So thank you. Yeah. The elevator pitch that I use is that the Akashic Records are a dimension of consciousness. So if you hear something in the background, I have a 36-year-old parrot who gets excited over these things. And so
yeah, I was just going to ask you to tell them, because I was like, what's that noise? Is it your microphone? So no, it's your parrot.
Yes. So it's a dimension, the Akashic Records are a dimension of consciousness that contain all of the information about a soul on its journey. And over the centuries, they've gone from being a tool used by elites only for divination to something that's available on a secular basis to everybody, and can be used for spiritual guidance in any situation that we're going through in our lives. So
where are the Akashic Records? I mean, the name makes it sound like they're in a big book somewhere. So where, where is this information?
Well, as in any kind of situation of consciousness, everywhere.
Okay.
It's not quantifiable in terms of time and space.
Okay.
But it is possible to make an energetic shift into the records, and that's what I do when I read for others and myself, and I also teach other people to do that for themselves. And I do it according to the method I was taught by Linda Howe. And what it feels like is different for everybody, as some people do actually experience a hall of books. For me, it's never been like that. It's just been a place that's mostly about light. It's like kind of lowering a ceiling of light to my general experience, and then information flows that way.
So if you were doing a reading for me, let's say, you would go into a space where you would experience or be able to access prior lifetimes of mine, prior learnings of mine,
so
and
that's
share that with me, like.
Yeah. So because the Akashic Records contains all of the information about a soul, the catalog of the soul's lifetimes.
Right.
Yes. Usually what happens with me, and this was also the way I was taught, the way Linda teaches it, that past lives show up, or we can actively work with past lives when there's something brought forward from a past life that is still active in the present life. Okay. So there's a real purpose for it to be revealed to us.
Right. And
I feel more comfortable that way because a lot of times we don't have strong empirical evidence for the existence of a past life.
Right.
Sometimes I've had a few experiences where we could see that, but mostly we don't. But it can be very helpful, it can be very healing to look at something, especially when we've got something going on in this life that can't be explained by the circumstances of this present life.
Right.
So, so that's a part of it, yeah. Mostly what it's about is looking at our lives in the front and center, what's happening now in our lives, and seeing what the soul level perspective is on that. It's generally a much wider, you can get a lot of information in the records that when we're just kind of going about our day-to-day existence, we're not aware of.
Right,
so
right.
There's
of course.
value in that, yeah.
So how did you go from being a lawyer to going woo-woo into Akashic Records? I mean, that seems like such a big jump. How did that happen for you?
So, I'm a baby boomer, right? So child of the 60s. And so, I've had that woo-woo thing going from very early on.
Right.
And what really got it going, and I've been told all my life I was intuitive, and I had to start fresh about 8 years ago. I had finished taking care of my parents living in the metropolitan New York City area, and I knew I did not want to stay there, and I knew I did not want to practice law. So I went to an intuitive development class thinking that I would just kind of wrest out of my subconscious what it was I was supposed to do next.
Right.
And it turned out more that I was ready to actually do that kind of work. So I started training as an intuitive, and then I'd heard about the Akashic Records and had a few readings with various practitioners. But then I found Linda herself, and as soon as I had a reading with her, I was kind of eating out of her hand. I'll follow you anywhere. So I trained with her. And yes, I'm still doing it. It's still where all the juice and the energy is. I've trained in many other modalities for helping people,
right.
And I keep going back to the records. It's really where it's all happening for me. Yeah.
And so, how does living in China? Let's see, you lived in China.
Yes.
For 10 years, right? Working in aid and education. So
yeah.
How do you feel that, what was that all about? And how do you feel that impacts what you do now?
I feel like that is, so what's interesting is that is a closed book for me, but actually Linda Howe is teaching in China now. Oh. She's been teaching in China for the last few years. Ah. So I'm not going to speculate on, whatever bigger meaning that is.
Right.
When I was working there, I traveled a lot, and I made a number of trips to Tibet and Tibetan areas. And that's where I feel like I really hooked up with almost a visceral spirituality. It's something you feel so deeply in your body, you can't even intellectualize it. A lot of that has kind of gone by the wayside in China proper. But I understand that it's being revived in certain ways. It's not encouraged, but as long as it doesn't include a political component, then
they're okay with it.
It's accepted. Yeah, yeah.
But you live there. Do you must speak?
Yeah, I have
Chinese?
A degree in Chinese. Yes, in Mandarin. Yes.
So you were over there, and what kind of aid were you involved in, or education? What were you doing? I mean, I know you say it's a closed book, but it's fascinating.
Oh, so I taught English for 2 years, and this was in 1989, right after Tiananmen. I was in one of those, one of the universities that was very heavily involved. So that was, I was kind of a witness to that post, to the what happened to that country after the massacre.
Right.
And then I worked for the Australian government, running an agricultural research center for 5 years. So I ran their China program. Yeah.
So you must have some opinions about some of the things going on with the world, kind of the things that are going on globally right now that involve the U.S. and China, and Australia is just going through some real, I'm assuming you follow some of that. Given the kind of work that you do and working with people at the level that you work with them, what take do you have? It'd just be interesting to me. What is your take on what's going on, like with China and the U.S. and kind of that whole thing?
So in more recent years, my life changed totally when I returned back to the United States.
Right.
And so living in China for me was an exercise in wanderlust, and I still have that, right? But, I've really been focusing on inner processes, and especially with A Course in Miracles, I feel like my perspective has really just gone from the outer world to the inner world, and it doesn't. So I don't want to not answer your question, but I feel like what's happening. It's kind of hard not to inject a political viewpoint in it as well. I feel like the Chinese are reacting to what's happening on the world stage, as would be expected.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And some of the changes that, I've been off the scene for quite a while. I came back at the end of 1999, but some things are very much the same. There's their regime is they're kind of relying on 2,000 years of their own history to and that includes that political, how they keep the country together.
Right.
So another way of putting, they're used to having a heavy hand politically.
Right. Yes.
To maintain stability.
Yes.
And that's pretty much, and they're very ambitious. They're not as poor as they were.
Right.
And so they're trying to become, a major player on the world stage, and they're succeeding. Yeah.
Absolutely, they are. Yeah. Absolutely, they are. Yeah, and if we would all just learn to play nice together, I think there's a place for everyone, but part of that's an evolutionary cycle. At least that's how I look at it, that every country has its part to play, just like we as individuals have our parts to play wherever we are. Each country has their part to play in this fabric that we live in on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it that way, I mean, and people are people everywhere,
right?
And they have their egos, and then they have their bigger,
right?
Their better half. They have their angel on one shoulder and devil on the other.
Right.
We're all saying that way. And then countries, America, is an experiment in democracy. It's pretty young. It's only been a few hundred years.
I know.
And it's going to work out now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so who's to say what the better model is? But certainly something that gives people a lot of breathing room is a good one to follow, I think. When I lived in China and then I would make my yearly trips home to the States, I would notice I would appreciate this country greatly.
Right.
For so many different reasons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, Travel, it's interesting that we're getting into this part of a discussion. I find it fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I recently interviewed Mark Dodich, who does our astrological columns and so on. And he takes people on spiritual pilgrimages. And he's taking people to Greece next year. And so we did an interview about spiritual travel and spiritual pilgrimage. And one of the things he and I both talked about that we both feel strongly about is how important it is for us to experience other cultures.
Yes.
By traveling. And I haven't traveled a lot, but I've been to Europe a couple of times and I've been to some other countries, and it so opens your mind. And like you said, people are people everywhere. We may have a different life experience. We may live under a different political system or religious system or whatever, but we all still ultimately are people,
Yes.
And I think when you experience that, and that would be the value to something like what you did by living there that long, to really experience that is invaluable. Yeah.
Frankly, I think it's really, really fun to live overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not ruling it out in the future.
Right. Yeah. If things came out.
Their hearts. So you can connect with anybody through a heart.
That's right.
All have hearts.
Right, and you don't even have to always know the language. That was the other thing we were talking about. I mean, yes, if you're going somewhere, I think it's prudent to learn, some basics of the language. But, speaking energetically and some pointing and gesturing will get you miles.
Yes.
And because, again, we just speak different languages, but we're still people and still, experiencing life the way that we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do readings for people. So if people wanted to contact you to talk to you one-on-one, how would they go about getting in touch with you?
So I have a website, DebbieRitter.net, and my email is DebbieR@eclipse.net. So that's pretty much, those are really good ways to contact me.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody wants to just talk to you further or get more information, they can go to your website, and I've put it up on the screen so they can write it down, and then you can talk to them through email or phone or whatever, and kind of
you can sign up for my newsletter. I keep all of my, I go out. I don't just sit at home and do readings. I go out and I do them at various places, and
that's good.
I teach as well. So my newsletter has all of that information as well. So, yeah.
And then they can follow your columns at newspiritjournal.com, and they can learn more about you that way. So thank you very much, Debbie, for your time today. I appreciate it. Fascinating information, and we'll be following you in your columns and online and take it from there. So I wish you the best. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.